Howdy YouTube family, it's Bolt RN coming to you from Tennessee. I'm here now in Tennessee at CRNA school. I am about 5 weeks into the program now and everything's settled in pretty well. I'm getting pretty accustomed to everything, and I've just thought, I've had a few people online and people in real life tell me that I should do a video about how to get into CRNA school, since that's such a big part of the process. And so many people wonder about that. And I myself tried to get into CRNA school and was successful, but there's lots of people who aren't successful, and I think it'd be good to make a video about 5 simple steps to get into CRNA school. Here's the disclaimer though, I'm by no means an expert and I don't know everything there is to know about it, but I have interviewed at 2 different CRNA schools. I do have lots of friends who have interviewed at CRNA schools. I have professors who are professors in CRNA programs. I've had a lot of feedback over the last couple of years, and especially in the last year, on things that they look for CRNA applicants and things that make people successful on getting into school. So that's what I've comprised these 5 simple steps of. Step number 1, first obtain your BSN. Of course, you probably are all nurses if you're watching this video. If you're not a nurse, you're planning to do a nursing degree. A lot of people will know, of course, to be a CRNA, which is a certified registered nurse anesthetist, you have to first be an RN. Of course, there are RNs that don't have their BSN. You can have your ADN, which is an associate's degree, and be working as an RN. So first thing you have to do, if you don't already have your BSN, go get it. And while you're getting your BSN, you need to make sure and take something like organic chemistry. Almost all BSNs require a chemistry of some sort, but don't make the mistake of taking inorganic or general chemistry or something like that. If you have the ability and your nursing program will let you do this, take organic chemistry. In fact, if you can take extracurricular classes on top of your regular courses, I know it's a lot, but some CRNA school programs require physics. There is some programs that want organic chem and 2, so they want you to take both of them. There's a couple different tricky prerequisite courses some CRNA schools ask you to do. But the big one is organic chemistry. That's a big one. You're severely limiting yourself on where a program will take you if you don't have organic chemistry. And physics, I've seen it at a few places too. That's an extra thing that you don't necessarily have to do. If you already know the program you want to apply to, check it out, see if they require physics. It's not going to hurt you, because when you get into CRNA school, there's some concepts that go along with what we're learning that kind of would be helped if you knew more about physics. I know just what I learned in high school, and so it's a little harder on me. So it might help you. Another benefit of having your BSN is if you choose to not go to CRNA school or can't get in or something happens, whatever, you've got your BSN, you can go to another grad school. Any grad school, any advanced practice thing you're going to go into as a nurse is going to require your BSN. So just get it out of the way. It's smart to have it. It's good to have it. And a lot of hospitals actually are starting to request you to have your BSN, and some won't even hire you if you don't have your BSN. And others may even pay you higher pay hourly than an ADN nurse. So just get it. And also remember, don't think you could just get your BSN and that's the only step. You have to make good grades. You have to maintain a pretty high GPA. Now, to be competitive, a lot of programs will list 3.5. They expect you to have a 3.5 GPA upon graduation, and that's usually cumulative. That means your nursing school classes, your prereq classes, everything all together. That's going to be really hard to do. You need to make like all A's in your prereqs, because nursing school, you're going to be hard-pressed to find somebody who makes A's in nursing school. You might make an occasional A, but go ahead and fluff up your GPA and your prereqs with all A's, so when you get into nursing school and you make quite a few B's probably, and maybe even a C here or there, you're not going to totally destroy your GPA. I had like a 3.4 GPA, so it doesn't mean you have to have a 3.5. That doesn't mean you're disqualified from getting in. But 3.4, it's a little bit harder. Once you start getting down to the 3.3s and 3.2s and lower than that overall GPA, you're really looking at having a difficult time getting in. All right, so now that you've got your BSN, step number 2, now get into an ICU. Now, this is not totally easy. to be honest. This is a simple step. It's not an easy step. I have a lot of friends who have tried for a long time, even a couple years, to get into an ICU, and they have not been totally successful. Now I have other friends, including myself, who did get right into an ICU, and it happened and it worked for them. But it's not a guarantee. And sometimes you may have to move. Like, you may have to move to another hospital or another town, or you might have to take a job in an ICU that's not really that, not a lucrative position. It may not pay that well. It might be out in the country somewhere. It may be just a small 10-bed ICU that just does vents and basic little drips, and you might have to get your starting experience somewhere like that and then work there a year or so and then apply to another bigger, nicer ICU with better experience and stuff in a city, then apply there and try and get in there. You don't want to stay in a small little baby ICU your whole time, because they'll ask you when you're applying to CRNA school about your experience level and about what kind of patients you've been taking care of, and they're not looking for you to have taken care of like basic, simple patients that have had not really any advanced disease processes or surgical procedures or anything that requires high-level thinking. They don't want to see that you've had very little challenging thoughts and stuff, because CRNA is like souped up steroid ICU nurse, and they want to see that you're already at least a very competent ICU nurse to begin with. So get into an ICU. I can give you more tips on how to get into an ICU. I got into an ICU right out of nursing school at my first job. It took some networking and it took some hard work, but I did it, and I know other people who did it too. So it can be done. If you want tips on it, I'll give you tips on it. But that's a whole nother topic. And also, when you get into the ICU, like I said, make sure it's a good quality ICU. Sometimes the type of ICU that you're in, or the advanced procedures that you do in your ICU matters. If your ICU doesn't do CRRT, if they don't do intra-aortic balloon pumps, if they're not doing ventrix and things like that, you probably need to find a different ICU. That doesn't sound like a very advanced ICU. They don't sound like they're going to be a very good pick to get into CRNA school. So get into an ICU. Then, after you've been in the ICU for at least a year, you have to be in it for a year before you can sit for this exam, take your CCRN. That's your Critical Care Registered Nurse certification. It requires a year of practice first, but once you have that, study up for it. It's a really hard test. It's like $300 up front you got to pay, and pretty much no hospital is going to pay for it for you. I may have heard of one hospital that reimburses if you pass it. But anyway, so you're going to have to pay for that, save up for that up front. It's a really hard test. I failed it my first time. I went in very cocky. I thought I had it. I studied for it though. I mean, I bought a book and I bought a web software program called Pass CCRN, and I took some quiz questions and stuff, but I didn't take it really seriously, and I didn't cram and really study hard, because I figured I was an experienced ICU nurse. I had worked in like 7 or 8 different ICUs all over the United States, and so I went into it and I failed it, because it is hardcore advanced cardiophysiology questions, things that most cardiologists would probably be stumped about, and I barely failed it, but I failed it, so I had to take it a second time. I passed it my second time, but that's $300 2 times I had to take that. So study up for it well in advance, months in advance, and take it serious, because it's not easy. But yes, take your CCRN. Almost all programs are going to require you to have it, and they will ask you if you have it when you apply. All right, step number 3, you're going to have to be proactive. This means you're going to have to be taking on extra roles in your ICU. So once you've got your year of experience or so, and you've got your CCRN, you need to go to your nurse manager and you need to say, hey, let me precept new hires. Let me start trying to take on new roles around the unit. Let me get on nurse-driven councils where you work with other nurses to help identify problems in the unit, like CAUTIs or VAPs, which are like catheter-associated UTIs or ventilator-assisted pneumonia. These are big, hot topic items that people are really invested in, especially nurses, because they affect the insurance reimbursement for that hospital if you have those on your unit. So a lot of nurse-driven councils focus on things like that. Restraint documentation. Those are all big things. Your manager will like that you want to get involved and want to do those type of things. And CRNA school is going to be looking for you to have done proactive things. They're going to be looking for you to have shown that you are a leader, that you stand out different from the other nurses on the unit, and that you're looking to be more than just a bedside nurse. So go ahead, get on those councils. Next step in being proactive, start shadowing CRNAs. If you don't know anyone at your hospital, if you don't know any of the CRNAs, CRNAs usually stay off in their own, surgical center or in the surgical suites. So you don't really see them all that much. If you don't know them, go to Human Resources, talk to some of those people, see if they can connect you up with some CRNAs. Usually CRNAs don't mind helping other people, ICU nurses who want to shadow them. And then when you shadow them, be very polite, get them to like you, try and be personable and stuff, because you're going to need their help. You're going to need them to write you a letter. That's going to be very important. Part of this networking is getting them to write you a letter. Actually, you're going to need your nurse manager to like you, because most programs want your current nurse manager to write you a glowing letter of recommendation talking about your working ethics and your clinical skill and all that kind of stuff. They're going to want an anesthesiologist or a CRNA that you have shadowed, that you can show you shadowed. They're going to want them to write you a glowing letter of recommendation of why you deserve to be a CRNA. And then they're also usually going to want an ICU physician. You might get by with 2 CRNA or anesthesiologist letters of recommendation and 1 nurse manager, but usually they're going to want 1 from all 3. Most programs want 1 from, and they're called intensivists or ICU physicians. So they want to see that from a medical ICU physician's perspective who works with you, in the unit, they want to see that person feels like you're skilled and competent and proactive and also going to be a successful student as a CRNA. So you're going to need to do all of those things. Also, look into being a charge nurse. Now, this isn't necessarily all that important. I know people who haven't done charge nursing before who've got into CRNA school, but I've noticed that every program asks me. Every time I had applied or even thought of applying to a program, was looking up their details, their application stuff, they ask questions about charge nurse and leadership roles. So if you've not done even filling in charge nurse roles, you should jump in and do that. I'm not saying be the main charge nurse for the floor, but at least let the nurse manager know, hey, on days that the typical charge nurses who are usually there are not here, could you have me try it out or something like that, or be an assistant to the charge nurse, or do something like that. Try and be proactive as much as you can in that field, just to show that you're a leader. On to number 4. So this one kind of stinks. Some people hate this one the most. It's take the GRE. The GRE stinks. There are some programs, a couple that you can get into that don't require the GRE. As of this point, they might start requiring it in the near future. I don't know. It seems like the more time goes on, the more programs start requiring it. So I wouldn't count on your program not requiring it. I would probably count on them requiring it, since most do, and they seem to be moving that direction. So the GRE, of course, is the graduate's exam. Pretty much all programs of graduate level require you to take the GRE before you go in, except med school. They have their own test, which is called MCAT, and I think lawyers have something called LSAT or something like that. But in general, most people take the GRE. It's a long, tedious, terrible test. You need to study for it. It's not like nursing school test. It's a different kind of test. It's not even typical information that you would know. It's pretty much testing to see how far it can push you and how far you can use critical thinking and analytical writing and all these kind of things. It's testing us a lot like an intelligence test almost. It's quantitative analysis and things like that. So it's not a fun test. It's not it's not cheap either. So just save up some money for that too. I know you've already paid for the CCRN, but now you're going to pay for this too. And you're also going to pay for the books and the studying materials to get ready for it and invest the time in it. But just take it. All you have to really do is score like an average on it. You don't have to score. For most programs, they're not looking to see that you scored super, super high. They want to see that you can take the test and you can score decent. It's not their main focus. Most programs, the GRE is not their main focus, but some will require that you at least meet benchmark scores on it to show that you're pretty competent. So take it serious, just get it over with. Step number 5, it's actually what you guys are doing right now. You're planning ahead. By planning ahead, you are actually watching a video about how to get into CRNA school. So this is a little bit more farther along this process for you though. This is more like you need to figure out where you want to go to school. There's a lot of CRNA schools all over the nation. You need to figure out what kind you want. You need to figure out where you want to live, because you're going to have to live there for at least 2 years. Minimum program length is 2 years. A lot are 3 years now because they're all transitioning to doctorates. So they're all transitioning into like 3-year long programs. A couple are even 3.5. So that's a long time. You're looking at living in that place for a long time, and you got to think about cost of living. If you're going to live in LA, if you're going to go to school in LA and do CRNA school around that area, you got to realize you're not going to be able to work when you're in CRNA school. So the monthly rent that you're going to pay is going to accrue pretty quick if you're paying $2,000 a month for your rent with no money coming in so you can go to school, versus live in a small town in Oklahoma or something where you can get a 1-bedroom for $600 a month. That's a lot cheaper to live. So that's what I mean by know where you want to go to school. You got to figure that kind of stuff out. You got to analyze all your options and figure out, where your family, where your friends. Some people it doesn't matter. Some people like me, I was going to go wherever I got into school, as long as it was a good fit school for me. The whole family and friends where they were at, that was way secondary. That didn't really matter to me. But to some people, especially if you've got young kids or you're married or you've got a lot of that kind of, or your parents are sick or something, you want to be in a school near where you're at. So you find out what school you want to go to, then you find out the requirements for that school. This goes back to me talking about earlier about how they might want you to have physics. They may require organic chem 1 and 2. There's some really weird specifics that some programs require. So you need to have an idea of where you're planning to go, or at least a list of like, this is your top pick, this is your second pick, this is your third pick, and you need to make sure that out of all those picks that you have all the requirements for them. So after you do that, you need to find out about that school's interview process. So each school interviews, you're going to have to interview for every CRNA school program, but some of them interview differently than others. Some of them do what's called a behavioral interview, which is actually what I interviewed at the Mayo Clinic last year for their CRNA program. And they use a behavioral type technique, which is it was an 8-hour long process of an interview. They got us all together in a room. They asked us a lot of questions about why we deserve to be CRNAs and what makes us interesting and stuff. And you had to get up in front of the class and tell everybody. And the professors are in the class too, and they're watching you. They're seeing how you're responding, how you're acting. Then they gave us a piece of paper and they said, it was like a random essay. And they're like, write an essay for us right now and turn it in 5 minutes or whatever. It was longer than 5 minutes, but it was a short time span. And they want to see your writing skills and the way that you can formulate an idea out of thin air. And then they walk you around the hospital and they analyze how you're acting and what you're touching and the questions you're asking, and you're constantly being watched for 8 hours. Then they take you into certain rooms and they ask you really difficult questions like, tell me about a clinical situation you were in where a doctor was doing something unethical. What did you do specifically in that situation? How did you respond? How did the patient outcome turn out? And how did your peers respond to you in that situation? I think that was exactly one of my questions. And they want specifics. They want you to tell them of specific examples of exactly what happened. And you won't know these questions before you get into the room. You have to already be thinking up in your mind of questions they might ask, and you have to be ready to go. And they actually count off on your points, and if you take too long to respond to them thinking. Or if you don't answer exactly correctly, kind of like the way that you should, or you answer a little off topic, or you get flustered, or you get embarrassed, or whatever, that all counts off. It's behavioral. They're seeing how you work under pressure. So that's a behavioral interview. A lot of programs are kind of moving that way. Another way that some schools interview is very clinical based. I had a buddy that came in and they asked him right off the bat very specific questions about adrenergic responses when you use dopamine in a patient with diabetes, and what would happen if the insulin or the glucose was like this. And they were asking very specific physiological questions and cardiovascular questions that really were stumped him. They were asking questions that your typical ICU nurse probably is not going to know. So you have to study and prep for that, just in case your program throws in random curveballs. And I actually have a study guide. If you guys are getting close to this point of interviewing and you want it, I can email it to you. It's like a 26-page packet of really hard, really tricky physiological ICU questions that other people who have interviewed CRNA schools, they've wrote these questions down of what they were asked and the answers to these questions, so you can kind of be prepped and ready. You can study that up and be ready if that happens. So also figure out why you want to be a CRNA. That's something that I've heard from every single program and every single CRNA student who's interviewed. They were asked, why do you want to be a CRNA? And the program's going to want to hear a good answer. And I mean, there's not one simple answer. Of course, it's going to be a little different for everybody. But the point is, it's got to be unique to you. It's got to be meaningful. It has to be a reason it has to be something that makes sense of why you're going through all of this work and you're doing all of this. And they want to see that it's not for money. They want to see that it's not because you want more power or autonomy. They don't want to see any kind of ego answers or anything like that. That's not going to be good. You're going to want to answer honestly and from the heart, and you're going to want to have like a legit reason that's beyond all of those superficial things. And of course, superficial things like that, people, have those in the back of their mind sometimes too, but there has to be a deeper reason than that. And honestly, if you're in it for those kind of wrong reasons, you're probably going to fail out of school, because the first month you're going to be slammed with so much hard stuff. You're going to say, this is not worth it for me. I'm going to go back to being a bedside nurse, and I can make good money doing that. Or I can do, go to nurse practitioner school and do something much easier than this. If you're in it for the wrong reasons, you're going to fail out probably anyway. So that's probably another reason why they're asking, why do you want this? So know your reasons. Practice your interview skills. Practice coming into a room and sitting down and talking about yourself. Know what makes you special. Know what makes you stand out apart from the crowd, because they're going to want to know, why do you deserve to be in our program? Why should we pick you over someone else? Also know why you picked their program. They're going to want to know why you want their program. Out of all the CRNA school programs, why'd you pick theirs? And if it's something like, because it's the only one I could get into, or something like that, that's the wrong answer. I wouldn't answer that way. You need to think of something that's meaningful and a real reason of why you picked their program. Hopefully there's a lot of good reasons why you picked their program, because you're going to be invested, and you're going to be that's going to be a big part of your life, and the rest of your career, that will be where you went to CRNA school. So it's a big deal why you picked that program, and it's going to affect and change you. So you should know why. And lastly, this is bonus points, but save up money. Planning ahead, of course, you're going to need to save up money. In school, you're going to take out student loans. Nothing you can do about that unless you just have like $150,000 sitting aside somewhere. Then good for you. But if you have anything less than that, you're going to be taking out student loans, and they're going to accrue interest, and it's going to be a whole big mess. And trust me, I can go into a lot of details on the agony of all that. But save up some money. I went travel nursing for 2 years before CRNA school, and I put money aside. I put what I thought was a lot of money aside, but it turns out in the great scheme of 3 years and a doctorate CRNA school program, it's a drop in the bucket. I don't have nearly as much as I would need, so I'm still taking out plenty of loans. But it does help cushion things. I'm not scared of, like, if I'm going to run out of money between the loan disbursement checks from this check to that check, I'm going to be okay. And if something happens, or my car breaks down, or something goes wrong in my life, I'm not totally in trouble financially. So save up money. It's going to take a huge burden off of you. You're not going to be able to work while you're in school, so don't go into CRNA school with $4,000 in a savings account hoping that you're going to be good, because that's not good. That's really bad. So you need to put significant amount of money, like aim for, I'd say, $30,000 or more. Try and do as much as you can, but really $30,000, it would be a good, kind of like a cushion for CRNA school. So anyway, these are all of my tips. I hope this was helpful to you, and I will think up other ideas of other videos as they come along, as things happen in CRNA school, and I come up with new concepts and stuff I can talk to you about, things I find would be helpful to you. And if you guys think of anything, let me know in the comments below, and bolt out.